Hello and welcome to Creative You Knitting and Crocheting Podcast. It's 15 minutes out of your day. Thank you for spending it with me. So today I think I'm going to focus on crochet, and the theme this week has been encouragement and compliments that have changed your life. I found a poem that I've had tucked away, and it's about speaking a word when you should, not letting an opportunity pass. I've heard people say, oh, I don't know why I didn't speak up for him or her, or I didn't, or I let that opportunity get away. I should have asked her to marry me, whatever. Here's the poem. It's by Mark F Griswold. A word and the skies would brighten. A word and the clouds would fly. A word and the soul finds healing, and hurt hearts cease to sigh. O word, ere too late be spoken, let the threshold of silence be crossed, ere the thread of thy fate be broken, and thy chance forever be lost. So, please give someone a compliment today. Tell them why you are important, why they are important to you. Moving along on the ripple blanket with Cascade Whirligig. So I had said before, this is upscale because it's not just acrylic. It's, I think, 60% merino. Merino is your better grade of wool. Have to say overall though, I'm disappointed. Maybe if I were knitting and I had the prime needles that have the little spoon shape and catch the yarn, because I feel like my yarn is constantly splitting and I have to finagle and hold my fingers a certain way, and I have to tear out and go back. So I don't know that I would make another one with this yarn. Also, as I was going along with my orange, all of a sudden I get green. And then there's another area where you remember what Shakespeare said in one of his plays, out damn spot. So here, right there, all of a sudden I got purple. When I just had the orange and the purple, it certainly didn't look as nice as it does now that this rose color has been added. It's a little tricky to figure out if you're going to have enough yarn to go the whole way around. Sometimes self-striping yarns just seem to work out perfectly. They end at the end of the row. You don't know how it works, but it just seems to work perfectly. But I don't want a color to end in the middle because it skews the way your pattern looks. And so I will cut the yarn and weave it in and begin a new color. So what I did, I measured how much yarn it would take to do one section and then multiplied it by how many sections to see if I have enough. You don't want to get 3/4 of the way around and then find out that you don't have enough. So better to work smart and plan ahead. There's a little saying, he who fails to plan, plans to fail. So, if someone, say they were stuck in bed, they broke their ankle, whatever, they were going to be laid up for months, and they said to you, here's $180. Just go to the yarn store and just give me anything. I'm not picky. Well, you know that person is kind of particular, and they're not your best friend, they're an acquaintance, and they just say, here, go, get some patterns and think. Well, that happened to me the other day. I spent all day trying to look for patterns, trying to get a variety of things. So I'm going to call her and ask her how it's going with the things I picked out for her. And not only the things, but the colors, and trying to do a variety of yarns. So crocheters, if you haven't heard of CJ Brady Designs, she does beautiful designs. This was third in a series of Monet, the painter, inspired. It is a cowl called, I think, Field of Poppies, and Field of Poppies cowl. One thing I like, it has a lot of trebles in it, and I really like this. This yarn somehow reminds me of an old-fashioned quilt or something, but the way the stitches angle and go, I like the way you just see the little flecks of yellow here and there. This is a fingering weight yarn by Cherry Tree, I think Super Sock Select with silk. It feels great on the fingers. The rows go pretty quickly. You might be saying, what about that other shawl you're working on? How many projects do I have going at one time? Just one. I only work on one at a time. That's what I always say. So, moving on to books. This is what I'm reading now. Troublesome Creek, Christian Writers Guild, winner of the 2004. And it starts out about a girl whose mother is starting to tell her, Laura Grace, act like a lady. And she hears her father say, let her go. Don't rush her. She's in the creek trapping tadpoles. And I remember that age. You don't want to grow up. You still want to be a kid. The older you get, you look back and your youth was just a magical time, your childhood. And if you don't mind poems, I found another poem I really love. It's called The Return to Old Scenes. He sought the old scenes with eager feet, the scenes he had known as a boy. Oh, for a draught of those fountains sweet and a taste of that vanished joy. He roamed the fields, he wooed the streams, the schoolboy paths essayed to track. The orchard ways recalled his dreams, the hills were like his mother's face. Oh, sad, sad hills, oh, cold, cold hearth. In sorrow he learned this truth. One may return to the place of his birth. He cannot go back to his youth. The return to old scenes. So, isn't that true? You can never go back to your youth. It becomes this magical time in your mind. Everybody has those dream patterns, those things that you tuck away year after year after year. You might never make it. And if you did, it might be disappointing, but still. This is one in my stash. And we sometimes know that they look fabulous on the model and they may not look fabulous on us. But still, I'm enthralled by it. I think it's lovely. Here is a second shot of it. So it could be a crop top. It's in a Jennifer book, and you actually make 32 motifs. And it looks like they had maybe a metallic type yarn, but one of these days, I'm gonna give it a try. May look better on a younger woman. I don't know, but I'm gonna give it a whirl. Knitters out there, I'm sure the name Elizabeth Zimmermann means something to you. She was a master knitter, author of books, and She learned to knit as a child growing up in World War I in England. I remember she said that her governess would not allow her to do the German way of knitting. And sounds like they were a pretty well-to-do household. And this was the question. You once wrote that you disapproved of a crocheted border on a knitted cardigan. What else do you disapprove of? Her answer, you hit the nail on the head. I won't touch a crochet. Well, I'll touch a crochet hook to pick up a drop stitch, but I never crochet, and it goes back to my childhood. Once when I was staying with my grandparents, I got bored and wandered into the kitchen. It was after lunch, and the maids were taking their tea, and one of them was crocheting. I said, what are you doing? And she said, crocheting, as the English call it, crocheting. And I said, show me. So she did, and I was fascinated. After I had done a bit, I took it into the drawing room, and my grandmother said, what are you doing? And I told her, crochet. She said, that's what the servants do. It's a snobbish little tale, but absolutely true. I must have been 7 at the time, and it made a strong impression. Boo-hoo, right? My goodness. But that's part of her story, and that's part of her life, and we can't change that. So I thought I would talk a little bit about Skeins of Yarn. People will come into the shop and they'll say, oh, my pattern says I need 8 50-gram balls. Well, maybe, maybe not. You have to know what that yarn was and how many yards were in that ball. So for example, 50 grams of acrylic yarn could be 190 yards to 219. 50 grams of wool could be 130 yards. 50 grams of cotton, 115 yards. So it's a big discrepancy. So that's one of my tips for the day. Now to convert yards, and your pattern tells you need meters. Converting meters to yards, you add 10%. So if you need 224 meters, you add the first two numbers, 22, okay? If your ball of yarn says it's 105 meters, you add 10, so you have 115 yards. If you remember that quick and fast little rule, it will help you a lot. So 552 meters, you add 55. So I hope that helped. And in closing, I'd like to tell you a little quote from Abraham Lincoln. He said, when I die, I hope that people say I always pulled up a weed where I could plant a flower. And I think that's really beautiful. Many years ago when I was raising my children, we used to take walks, and I used to also like to walk my dog. And I would walk down the street, and then I would go into an alley and around. And it was just really nothing back there. Bunch of weeds, really. Well, I went to college, and probably about 4 years passed. And one day I walked down there with the dog, and someone had transformed that area into an incredible garden. There were just all kinds of flowers, and it was manicured, and it was a feast for the eyes. And I always thought that's what I would love to do. Sometimes we do that with ugly yarn too. We turn it into something beautiful. So I hope you have a great weekend. Today is local yarn shop day. Unfortunately, most of the shops are closed. There is a pattern called Breathe and Hope by Cascade. That is free with purchasing yarn. That code is good until tomorrow evening. If you want to get in on that and purchase yarn, contact me at creativeyarns@gmail.com, and I will put that in the description for the podcast. So keep that big smile and shine, baby, shine.